The parking lot outside the shopping mall was busy, as usual. Cars moved slowly, drivers scanning for open spots while shoppers hurried in and out with bags and carts. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, but for Lieutenant Maya Johnson, this day would become anything but ordinary. Maya had just finished a long week of training exercises and was finally on leave. She decided to treat herself to a relaxing lunch with friends at one of her favorite restaurants inside the mall. Her black sedan turned into the parking lot, and she carefully navigated through rows of vehicles until she spotted an empty spot near the entrance. Perfect, she thought, close enough to save time walking back to her car after eating. She signaled and pulled smoothly into the space, turning off the engine with a satisfied sigh. But before she could even unbuckle her seatbelt, a loud screech of tires made her look up. A shiny silver SUV had come to an abrupt halt right beside her car, blocking her door. The driver, a middle-aged man wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, stepped out almost immediately. He slammed his door shut and glared at Maya through the tinted windows of her sedan. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, his voice sharp and angry. Maya frowned, confused. "Excuse me? You took my spot," the man snapped, jabbing a finger toward the ground. His tone grew louder, drawing attention from nearby shoppers who paused to see what was happening. Maya stepped out of her car calmly, closing the door behind her. She stood tall, her posture confident despite the tension building around them. "I'm sorry," she said evenly, "but I don't see any signs or markers saying this is your spot. I parked here because it was available." The man scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Are you serious? We were circling for 10 minutes waiting for someone to leave, and then you swoop in like you own the place." By now, his wife, or at least that's what Maya assumed based on the matching outfits and similar irritated expressions, had joined him. She crossed her arms over her chest and gave Maya a once-over, her lips curling into a sneer. "You really think this is where people like you belong?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Maya stiffened slightly at the remark, though she kept her expression neutral. People like me, she thought bitterly. Of course. This wasn't about a parking spot anymore, not really. People like me, Maya repeated, her voice steady but laced with quiet defiance. What exactly does that mean? The man laughed humorlessly, taking off his sunglasses to reveal narrowed eyes filled with contempt. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what we mean. Why don't you go find somewhere else to park? Somewhere more appropriate. More appropriate. The words hung heavy in the air, loaded with unspoken meaning. Maya felt her jaw tighten, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. Getting upset wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she looked directly at the couple, meeting their hostile stares with unwavering calm. "I have every right to be here," she said firmly, "just like anyone else. If you didn't want to wait, maybe next time you should try coming earlier." Her response only seemed to enrage the man further. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Listen, sweetheart. We've lived in this neighborhood for years. We pay our taxes, we follow the rules. Unlike some others who think they can just waltz in and take whatever they want." The woman chimed in again, her tone mocking. "Yeah, maybe if you actually worked hard for something instead of expecting handouts, you'd understand how things work around here." Maya clenched her fists briefly before letting them relax at her sides. She reminded herself that arguing wouldn't help. These two weren't interested in reason, they wanted a fight, and she refused to give them the satisfaction. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya said simply, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "If you have a problem with that, feel free to call security." The man's face flushed red with anger, and for a moment Maya wondered if he might actually lash out physically. But then a voice broke through the standoff. "Is everything okay here?" a young woman asked tentatively. She looked no older than 20, clutching a shopping bag tightly in one hand. Her presence drew the attention of other bystanders who had begun to gather around, curious about the commotion. The man whipped his head around, glaring at the newcomer. "This doesn't concern you," he barked. "Mind your own business." The young woman flinched but didn't back down entirely. She glanced nervously between Maya and the couple, clearly unsure of what to do. Finally, she muttered softly, Whatever's going on, it's not worth losing control over. Then she quickly stepped away, disappearing into the crowd. For a few seconds, silence reigned. Maya held the man's gaze, refusing to blink or look away. The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her watch as if eager to leave. But the man wasn't ready to let it go. He pointed a finger at Maya, his voice low and menacing. "You'll regret this," he growled. "Mark my words." Maya didn't respond. She simply folded her arms across her chest and waited. After another tense moment, the couple finally returned to their SUV, slamming the doors shut with unnecessary force. The vehicle roared to life, pulling away recklessly and leaving skid marks on the asphalt. As the sound of the engine faded, Maya exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the encounter lift slightly. She glanced around at the small crowd that had gathered. Some people nodded approvingly, silently acknowledging her restraint. Others whispered amongst themselves, shaking their heads at the behavior of the angry couple. One elderly man approached her, tipping his hat politely. "Ma'am, I saw the whole thing," he said. "You handled yourself with class. Don't let those folks get to you." Maya smiled faintly, grateful for the kind words. "Thank you," she replied. "It's just sad that something so trivial could turn into, well, that." The man shrugged sympathetically. "Some people are always looking for excuses to pick fights. Best not to let them win." With a final nod, he walked away, leaving Maya alone by her car. She checked her phone, realizing she was running late for lunch. Shaking off the remnants of the confrontation, she grabbed her purse and headed toward the mall entrance. Behind her, dark clouds began to gather in the sky, casting shadows over the parking lot. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, signaling an approaching storm. But Maya paid little attention to the weather. Little did she know the real storm was yet to come, and it would hit much closer to home than anyone expected. Maya walked briskly toward the mall entrance, her mind replaying the confrontation in the parking lot. She knew she had done nothing wrong. She had every right to park where she chose, but the couple's words still lingered in her thoughts. Their anger, their accusations, and their thinly veiled racism were all too familiar. Maya had faced similar attitudes before, both in civilian life and during her time in the military. It was exhausting, but she refused to let it break her. She stepped through the automatic doors of the mall. The cool air conditioning hit her face, offering a brief moment of relief from the growing tension outside. The noise of shoppers bustling about filled the space. Children laughing, cash registers beeping, and conversations overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Maya took a deep breath, trying to push the incident out of her mind. Today was supposed to be about relaxation, not drama. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her attention away from her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw a text from her friend Lisa. "Hey, I'm already at the restaurant. Where are you?" Maya quickly typed back, "On my way. Just got held up in the parking lot." Lisa replied almost instantly, "Everything okay?" Maya hesitated for a moment before responding. Should she tell Lisa what happened? No, she decided. There was no point in ruining their lunch with that kind of negativity. Instead, she sent a simple message. "Yeah, all good. Be there in 5. Putting her phone away, Maya made her way through the crowded mall corridors, weaving past groups of teenagers and families pushing strollers. The restaurant was on the second floor, so she headed toward the escalator. As she rode up, she glanced down at the first floor below and noticed something odd. A group of people standing near the main entrance, staring intently at their phones. Curious, Maya craned her neck to see what they were looking at. One teenager held his phone high, filming something outside. Another scrolled rapidly through social media, muttering excitedly to her friends. Whatever it was, it seemed to be spreading quickly. Maya shrugged it off, assuming it was just some viral trend or local event she wasn't aware of. For now, her focus remained on meeting Lisa and enjoying her meal. Back in the parking lot, things were escalating rapidly for Richard and Patricia Doyle. After storming off from their confrontation with Maya, they had circled the lot again, searching for another spot. But by now, the spaces were nearly full, and their frustration only grew worse. Richard gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as he muttered curses under his breath. "This is ridiculous," Patricia said, crossing her arms over her chest. "We should have just called security. That woman clearly doesn't belong here." Richard didn't respond. His mind raced with anger, not just at Maya, but at the entire situation. He felt humiliated, like everyone in the parking lot had been watching him lose control. And worst of all, he couldn't shake the feeling that Maya had somehow won by staying calm while he lost his temper. Finally, after several more minutes of circling, they found a spot far from the entrance. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Richard parked the car roughly, slamming the gear shift into park before getting out. Patricia followed, grumbling about how much farther they'd have to walk. As they approached the mall entrance, they noticed the same group of people huddled together, glued to their phones. At first, Richard dismissed them as typical teens wasting time online. But then he heard someone mention his name. "Wait, did you hear what he said?" one of the teenagers asked, pointing at her screen. "That guy totally flipped out." Patricia stopped walking, her eyes narrowing. "What are they talking about?" she whispered to Richard. He frowned, stepping closer to the group to get a better look. On one of the phones, he saw a video, his own face glaring back at him, red with rage, shouting at Maya in the parking lot. The caption read, "Racist couple loses it over parking spot." Richard's stomach dropped. "Oh no," he muttered, grabbing Patricia's arm. "They filmed us," Patricia gasped, clutching her chest. "What? Who does that?" Before Richard could answer, another voice chimed in behind them. "You're the ones from the video, aren't you?" a young man asked, holding up his own phone. The screen displayed the same clip, paused on Richard's angry expression. "This is insane. You guys are blowing up online." Richard felt his face flush with embarrassment. "Turn that off," he snapped, lunging forward as if to grab the phone. The young man stepped back, smirking. "Relax, dude," he said. "It's already everywhere. People are roasting you hardcore." Patricia grabbed Richard's arm, pulling him away from the crowd. "We need to leave," she hissed. "Now." But it was too late. More and more people were noticing them, pointing and whispering. Some laughed openly, while others shook their heads in disapproval. Richard and Patricia hurried toward the mall entrance, desperate to escape the unwanted attention. Inside, the atmosphere was no better. As they passed by stores and kiosks, they saw phones being raised, cameras snapping pictures. A security guard approached them cautiously, asking if everything was okay. Richard waved him off, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. But even the guard gave them a suspicious look, clearly aware of the commotion they had. Holding. Meanwhile, Maya met up with Lisa at the restaurant. They hugged warmly, catching up on each other's lives since their last meeting. Lisa was a fellow Marine, though she had left the service a few years ago to pursue a career in nursing. She had always admired Maya's strength and determination, and today was no exception. "You seem distracted," Lisa observed as they sat down at their table. "Are you sure everything's okay?" Maya hesitated for a moment, debating whether to share what had happened. Finally, she decided to tell Lisa about the parking lot incident. To her relief, Lisa listened without judgment, nodding sympathetically as Maya recounted the details. "Wow, that's messed up," Lisa said when Maya finished. "I can't believe people still act like that." Maya shrugged, sipping her water. "It happens more often than you'd think. Honestly, I'm used to it by now. What bothers me most is how entitled they acted, like they owned the place just because they drive an expensive car." Lisa nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Well, karma has a way of handling stuff like that. Maybe something good will come out of it." Maya smiled faintly. "Let's hope so. Anyway, enough about them. How's work going for you?" The two friends spent the next hour chatting and laughing, temporarily forgetting about the events in the parking lot. But outside, the storm clouds continued to gather, darkening the sky. Thunder rumbled louder now, echoing ominously across the parking lot. Back in the parking lot, strange things were beginning to happen. As Richard and Patricia finally returned to their SUV, Ready to leave the mall and put the embarrassing ordeal behind them, they noticed something unusual. Smoke was rising from beneath the hood of their car. At first they thought it might be steam from the engine overheating, but the smell was different, sharp and metallic like burning wires. "What's going on?" Patricia asked nervously, taking a step back. Richard popped the hood cautiously, peering inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The engine block, the heart of the vehicle, was completely melted, reduced to a twisted, useless lump of metal. Sparks flew erratically from exposed wires, creating small fires that spread quickly. "Oh my God," Patricia screamed, backing away further. "Call someone, do something." Richard fumbled for his phone, dialing emergency services with shaking hands. But as he waited for help to arrive, the damage worsened. The dashboard lights flickered wildly, before shorting out entirely. The tires deflated simultaneously, collapsing under the weight of the car. By the time firefighters arrived to extinguish the flames, the once pristine SUV was little more than a charred shell. Neither Richard nor Patricia could explain what had happened. Mechanics later examined the wreckage but found no logical cause for the destruction. Electrical malfunction, sabotage, no one could say for sure. All they knew was that their prized possession, and a symbol of their status, was gone in an instant. As the couple stood helplessly beside the remains of their car, the storm broke overhead. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching them and washing away the ash and debris. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their shocked faces. For the first time, Richard and Patricia realized that this day might not end well for them. Karma, it seemed, had struck swiftly and mercilessly. And somewhere nearby, oblivious to the chaos, Maya enjoyed her lunch, unaware of the dramatic turn the universe had taken in response to her earlier encounter. The rain came down hard, soaking everything in the parking lot. Richard and Patricia stood beside the wreckage of their SUV, utterly stunned. The firefighters had managed to put out the flames, but the damage was irreversible. Their once luxurious vehicle was now a blackened, twisted heap of metal that looked more like scrap than a car. Smoke still curled lazily from the engine bay, mixing with the steam rising from the wet asphalt. "What just happened?" Patricia whispered, her voice trembling. She clutched her arms tightly around herself, partly to shield against the cold rain and partly to hold herself together. Her expensive leather handbag hung limply from one shoulder, soaked through and dripping water onto the ground. Richard didn't answer. He stared at the remains of his car, his mind racing but unable to process what he was seeing. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cars didn't just melt into nothingness, it defied logic, physics, everything he thought he understood about the world. Yet here it was, undeniable proof that something had gone horribly wrong. "Maybe it's sabotage," Patricia suggested after a moment, her tone desperate for an explanation. "Someone must have tampered with it while we were inside." Richard shook his head slowly. "Who would do that? And how? We've been here the whole time. There's no way anyone could have gotten close enough without us noticing." Patricia frowned, biting her lip. Then what else could it be? Neither of them had an answer. The mechanics who arrived later confirmed their worst fears. There was no clear cause for the destruction. No faulty wiring, no overheating issue, no external tampering. Just chaos. One mechanic even joked nervously, "Looks like the car got struck by lightning or something." But everyone knew that wasn't possible. The storm hadn't started until after the incident began. As they waited for a tow truck to haul away the remains of their SUV, Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket. At first he ignored it, too overwhelmed to care. But when it buzzed again, and then again, he reluctantly pulled it out. His stomach sank as he saw the notifications flooding in. Dozens of missed calls, texts, and emails. Social media alerts blinked furiously on the screen. "What is it?" Patricia asked, noticing the look on his face. Wordlessly, Richard handed her the phone. She scrolled through the messages, her eyes widening with each passing second. News outlets, local blogs, and random strangers online were all talking about them. Videos of their confrontation with Maya had gone viral, shared thousands of times across platforms. Comments poured in, ranging from outrage to mockery. Some called them racists. Others labeled them bullies. A few even joked about their destroyed car being poetic justice. "This can't be real," Patricia muttered, handing the phone back to Richard. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the full extent of the damage. Not just to their car, but to their reputation. "We're ruined." Richard clenched his jaw, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But inside he felt like the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. For years he had prided himself on being successful, respected, someone people admired. Now in the span of a single afternoon, everything he had worked for seemed to be slipping away. Worse still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow connected to the argument in the parking lot. Karma, fate, whatever you wanted to call it, it felt personal. Inside the mall, Maya and Lisa finished their lunch, laughing over shared stories and old memories. The atmosphere was warm and lighthearted, a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding outside. Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. Being around Lisa always reminded her of why she joined the Marines in the first place, to stand up for what was right, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and to live a life of purpose. As they paid their bill and prepared to leave, Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw a text from her commanding officer, Colonel Matthews. "Call me ASAP." Her heart skipped a beat. Calls from Colonel Matthews were rare, especially when she was on leave. Was something wrong? Had there been an emergency deployment? She excused herself from Lisa and stepped aside to make the call. "Colonel Matthews, this is Lieutenant Johnson," she said, her voice professional despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Lieutenant, good to hear your voice," Colonel Matthews replied, his tone unusually cheerful. "I won't keep you long, I know you're enjoying your time off, but I wanted to let you know personally that you've been promoted to captain, effective immediately." Maya froze, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Captain?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's right," Colonel Matthews said, sounding pleased. "You've earned it, Johnson. Your leadership skills, dedication, and performance in the field have set you apart. Congratulations." For a moment, Maya was speechless. Promotions weren't uncommon, but this one felt different. It validated everything she had worked so hard for, not just in her military career, but in her personal life as well. Despite the challenges she faced, racism, sexism, unfair expectations, she had persevered. And now, finally, she was being recognized for it. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions bubbling inside her. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Colonel Matthews replied. "Take the rest of your leave to celebrate. You've earned it." When the call ended, Maya stood there for a moment, letting the news sink in. Captain Maya Johnson. It had a nice ring to it. She smiled softly, feeling a surge of pride and accomplishment wash over her. When she returned to the table, Lisa noticed the change in her expression immediately. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you just won the lottery." Maya chuckled, sitting back down. "Close enough, I got promoted to captain." Lisa's eyes widened, and she let out a loud cheer, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. "No way, that's amazing. Congrats." They spent the next few minutes celebrating, Lisa peppering Maya with questions about what the promotion meant and how she planned to mark the occasion. Maya shrugged, saying she hadn't thought that far ahead yet. For now, she just wanted to enjoy the moment. Outside, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the parking lot in brief bursts of white light. Thunder rumbled loudly, shaking the ground beneath Richard and Patricia's feet. They huddled under a small umbrella, waiting for the tow truck to arrive. Neither of them spoke, both lost in their own thoughts. Richard kept replaying the events of the day in his mind, searching for answers. Why had everything fallen apart so quickly? What had they done to deserve this? Deep down, he knew the truth. He had acted out of anger and entitlement, letting his biases get the better of him. But admitting that even to himself was too painful. Instead, he focused his frustration on Maya, blaming her for ruining his day. "She's probably laughing at us right now," he muttered bitterly, glaring at the mall entrance as if expecting to see her walk out any second. Patricia sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't think she's even thinking about us. People like her don't waste time worrying about people like us." Her words stung, though she hadn't meant them to. Richard shot her a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" Patricia hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. "It means we made fools of ourselves today, Richard. We let our tempers get the best of us, and now the whole world knows it. Maybe it's time we took a step back and figured out where we went wrong." Richard opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. As much as he hated to admit it, Patricia was right. Something needed to change, if not for their sake, then for their future. But change was easier said than done, especially when pride and fear stood in the way. By the time the tow truck arrived, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Richard and Patricia climbed into the cab, avoiding eye contact with the driver, who clearly recognized them from the viral videos. The ride home was silent, save for the occasional crackle of the radio. Neither of them spoke, each lost in their own guilt and regret. Meanwhile, Maya and Lisa left the restaurant, chatting animatedly about plans for the evening. As they stepped outside, the clouds began to part, revealing patches of blue sky. The air smelled fresh and clean, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Maya paused for a moment, looking up at the fading storm. She didn't know what had happened to the couple from earlier, nor did she particularly care. All she knew was that sometimes life had a way of balancing itself out. Justice, fairness, karma, whatever you wanted to call it, had a funny way of showing up when least expected. With a contented smile, Maya turned to Lisa. "Ready to go?" Lisa nodded, looping her arm through Maya's. "Let's do it." And with that, they walked away, leaving behind the remnants of the storm and stepping toward brighter days ahead. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm for everyone touched by the events in the parking lot. For Maya Johnson, now Captain Johnson, her promotion marked the beginning of a new chapter in her career. She returned to her duties with renewed energy, inspiring those around her with her leadership and unwavering sense of purpose. Her story became one of quiet strength, a reminder that dignity and resilience could triumph over ignorance and hate. At the base, she often gave talks to younger Marines about perseverance and staying true to oneself. During one such speech, she stood before a group of wide-eyed recruits, their faces reflecting admiration and curiosity. "Sometimes," she said, her voice steady and calm, "the hardest battles we face aren't on the battlefield. They're the ones fought within ourselves, against fear, against doubt, and sometimes against people who refuse to see us for who we are." Her words resonated deeply, not just with the recruits but also with her fellow officers. Many had heard snippets of her encounter in the parking lot, though Maya never brought it up herself. To her, it was simply another challenge overcome, another moment where she chose grace over anger. And yet the ripple effects of that day continued to spread far beyond what she realized. In the small town where Richard and Patricia Doyle had relocated, life remained difficult. Their attempts to rebuild were slow and fraught with setbacks. The couple attended counseling sessions twice a week, encouraged by a therapist who believed they still had a chance at redemption, if they were willing to put in the work. At first, both resisted, clinging to their old beliefs and blaming external forces for their misfortunes. But as time went on, cracks began to form in their defenses. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Richard found himself sitting alone on the porch of their modest rental home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He stared out at the horizon, replaying the therapist's words in his mind. "Change starts with accountability. You can't move forward until you acknowledge your mistakes." Patricia joined him moments later, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Richard without a word, sensing his need for silence. They sat together, watching the light fade, each lost in their own thoughts. "I've been thinking," Richard said finally, breaking the quiet. His voice was soft, tentative, about everything that happened, about us. Patricia turned to look at him, surprised. What about it? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I don't think we were wronged, Patricia, not really. I mean, sure, losing the car and my job, that was tough. But maybe it wasn't all bad luck. Maybe some of it was deserved. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Instead, she waited, giving him space to continue. We acted like jerks that day, Richard admitted, his tone heavy with regret. We let our pride and our biases take over. And yeah, maybe karma or fate or whatever you want to call it came back to bite us. But honestly, we brought most of this on ourselves. For a long moment, Patricia didn't respond. Then, slowly, she nodded. You're right, she said quietly. We did. And if we want things to get better, we have to start by owning up to that. The admission felt like a weight lifting off their shoulders. It wasn't easy, far from it. But it was a start. Over the following weeks, they worked harder in therapy, confronting the prejudices and entitlement that had shaped their worldview for so long. They began volunteering at local shelters and community centers, hoping to make amends in small ways. Though they knew they couldn't undo the past, they hoped to build a future rooted in humility and empathy. Meanwhile, back in the city where the incident had occurred, the teenager who had filmed the altercation in the parking lot found herself reflecting on the aftermath. Rachel, the young woman who had tried to intervene but ultimately stepped back, hadn't forgotten Maya's composure or the Doyles' hostility. The video she captured had gone viral, sparking conversations across the country about racism, privilege, and accountability. For Rachel, it was both empowering and humbling to see how something so simple could have such a profound impact. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, she came across an interview featuring Captain Maya Johnson. In the clip, Maya spoke about leading by example and standing firm in the face of injustice. Rachel paused the video, struck by the Marine's poise and wisdom. She remembered standing there that day, too afraid to speak up fully, and felt a pang of guilt. What if she had done more? What if she had stayed to support Maya instead of retreating? Determined to learn from the experience, Rachel decided to take action in her own life. She started attending workshops on racial equity and allyship, educating herself on issues she had previously overlooked. She also began using her platform online to amplify voices of marginalized communities, sharing stories and resources with her growing network of followers. It wasn't much, but it was a step toward becoming the person she wanted to be. As autumn rolled around, Maya received an invitation to speak at a veterans event honoring service members who had made significant contributions to their communities. She accepted graciously, seeing it as an opportunity to share her perspective with a broader audience. On the day of the event, she arrived early, mingling with attendees and exchanging stories with fellow veterans. Among the crowd, she spotted Rachel, the same young woman who had briefly intervened in the parking lot months earlier. Rachel approached her nervously, extending a hand. Hi, Captain Johnson, I'm Rachel. I filmed the video of you in the parking lot. Maya smiled warmly, shaking her hand. I remember you. Thank you for stepping in, even if it was just for a moment. Rachel blushed, looking down at her feet. To be honest, I wish I'd done more. I've thought about that day a lot since then. It inspired me to try to be braver, to stand up when I see something wrong. Maya nodded thoughtfully. That takes courage. Sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can make the biggest difference. Encouraged by Maya's kindness, Rachel shared how she had been working to educate herself and others about systemic inequality. Maya listened intently, offering advice and encouragement. By the time the conversation ended, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose, grateful for the chance to connect with someone whose strength she admired. Later that evening, during her speech, Maya reflected on the power of collective action. Justice isn't always immediate or obvious, she told the audience, but it has a way of finding its path, often through the smallest gestures of courage and compassion. Whether it's standing your ground, speaking out, or simply choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard, every action matters. Her words earned a standing ovation, leaving many in the room teary-eyed and inspired. As she stepped off the stage, Rachel caught her eye once more, mouthing a silent, "Thank you." Maya smiled, nodding in acknowledgement. Back in their new town, Richard and Paris tuned in to watch highlights from the event online. Seeing Maya's poised demeanor and hearing her thoughtful reflections hit them hard. For the first time, they truly understood the depth of character they had encountered that day in the parking lot, and how far they still had to go to match it. "We'll never be able to erase what we did," Patricia said softly, leaning against Richard. "But maybe we can keep learning. Keep trying to be better." Richard squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah, one step at a time." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Somewhere, perhaps in the whispers of the breeze, Karma smiled, not because justice had been served, but because growth had begun. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Richard and Patricia Doyle. The viral video of their confrontation with Maya had spread like wildfire, reaching far beyond their small suburban community. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as an example of unchecked privilege and racism in modern society. Social media users dissected every word they said, every gesture they made, turning them into symbols of everything wrong with entitled behavior. At first, Richard tried to fight back. He gave interviews to local reporters claiming he was misunderstood and that the entire situation had been blown out of proportion. "It was just a parking spot," he insisted during one particularly awkward TV appearance. "We didn't mean any harm." But his attempts at damage control only made things worse. Viewers saw through his excuses, calling him defensive and insincere. Comment sections filled with scathing remarks, mocking his tone-deaf explanations and pointing out the hypocrisy of his words. Patricia, on the other hand, retreated into silence. She avoided leaving the house, terrified of being recognized or confronted by strangers. When she did venture outside, usually to run errands late at night when fewer people were around, she wore oversized sunglasses and a hat, hoping to blend into the background. Even then, she couldn't escape the whispers and stares. Once, while standing in line at the grocery store, she overheard two women talking about her. "Isn't that her?" one whispered, glancing in Patricia's direction. "The woman from the video?" "No way," the other replied, squinting. "She looks different. But yeah, I think it is." Patricia hurriedly grabbed a few items and rushed to the checkout, her face burning with shame. By the time she got home, she was trembling, both from exhaustion and anxiety. Richard found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. "They know who we are," she said quietly, her voice hollow. "Everyone knows." Richard sighed, sinking into the chair across from her. "I know. Believe me, I know." Neither of them mentioned the destroyed SUV, though its absence loomed large in their lives. Without a car, they relied on rides from friends or expensive taxi services to get around. Their once comfortable routine had been shattered, replaced by constant stress and uncertainty. Bills piled up faster than they could pay them, especially since Richard's boss had called earlier in the week to inform him he was fired. The reason? An internal investigation revealed he had been embezzling funds from the company. A scandal that somehow coincided perfectly with the public fallout from the parking lot incident. "You should have seen his face," Richard muttered bitterly, recalling the phone call, acting all high and mighty like he's never bent the rules himself. Patricia didn't respond. She knew arguing wouldn't help. Instead, she focused on practical matters, like canceling subscriptions they could no longer afford and cutting back on unnecessary expenses. It wasn't enough, though. Every day brought new challenges, new reminders of how much their lives had changed. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her normal routine, blissfully unaware of the chaos still swirling around. Richard and Patricia. Her promotion to captain had lifted her spirits, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. She spent her remaining days off catching up with friends, visiting family, and preparing mentally for her return to duty. Life felt good, stable even, despite the lingering memory of the parking lot encounter. One evening, as she scrolled through social media, she stumbled upon a post shared by a mutual friend. It was a link to a news article titled, "Racist Couple's Downfall Goes Viral After Parking Spot Incident." Intrigued, Maya clicked on it and began reading. The piece detailed everything that had happened after she walked away: the strange destruction of the couple's car, the loss of Richard's job, and the overwhelming backlash they faced online. Maya leaned back in her chair, processing the information. Part of her felt sorry for them. No one deserved to be humiliated so publicly. But another part of her couldn't ignore the irony of their downfall. They had acted out of anger and prejudice, refusing to see her as an equal. And now, karma, or fate, or whatever you wanted to call it, had delivered a harsh lesson. She closed the article and set her phone aside, reflecting on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her or the Doyles. It was about the kind of world she wanted to live in, a world where respect and fairness mattered more than wealth or status, where actions had consequences, not because of luck or coincidence, but because people demanded accountability. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Opening it, she found Lisa standing there, holding a bottle of wine and a grin. "Hey, Captain," Lisa teased, raising the bottle. "Thought we could celebrate properly this time." Maya laughed, stepping aside to let her in. "You're relentless. You know that?" "That's why you love me," Lisa quipped, heading straight for the kitchen. "Now where are your glasses? We've got some serious celebrating to do." As they poured the wine and settled onto the couch, Lisa asked casually, "So, did you hear what happened to those people from the parking lot?" Maya nodded, sipping her drink. "Yeah, I saw the article. Pretty wild, huh?" Lisa shrugged, swirling her glass thoughtfully. "Can't say I feel bad for them. They brought it on themselves. Still, it's kind of scary how quickly things can spiral out of control." Maya agreed. "It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about how fragile our lives really are. One bad decision, one selfish act, and everything can change." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Lisa broke the quiet with a mischievous smile. "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" Maya asked. Lisa grinned wider. "You came out on top, promoted, respected, and completely unbothered by their nonsense. If that's not winning, I don't know what is." Maya chuckled, raising her glass in a toast. "To coming out on top, then." "To coming out on top," Lisa echoed, clinking, her glass against Maya's. Back at the Doyle household, things continued to unravel. Richard and Patricia sold their home, desperate to escape the judgmental eyes of their neighbors. They moved to a smaller town hours away, hoping to start fresh under the radar. But starting over wasn't easy. Richard struggled to find work, his reputation tarnished by the scandal. Patricia took a part-time job at a local cafe, earning barely enough to cover their basic needs. Their relationship suffered too. The stress of their situation pushed them to their limits, leading to arguments that grew louder and more frequent. Patricia blamed Richard for letting his temper get the better of him. Richard accused Patricia of not supporting him enough. Neither of them acknowledged the deeper issues at play: their prejudices, their arrogance, their refusal to take responsibility for their actions. One night, after yet another heated argument, Patricia broke down in tears. "I can't keep living like this," she sobbed, clutching a tissue tightly in her hands. "This isn't the life I wanted." Richard sat beside her, guilt weighing heavily on his shoulders. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly reflect on what had happened. He thought about the woman in the parking lot, Maya, and how calm and composed she had remained despite his aggression. He thought about the videos online, the comments calling him racist and entitled. Most of all, he thought about the choices he had made and the ripple effects they had caused. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I messed up big time." Patricia looked at him, surprised by his admission. "What do we do now?" Richard hesitated, unsure of the answer. But deep down, he knew one thing for certain. If they wanted to move forward, they needed to change, not just their circumstances but themselves. As weeks turned into months, the story of the parking lot incident faded from the headlines, replaced by newer, shinier scandals. Yet its impact lingered, shaping the lives of everyone involved. For Richard and Patricia, it served as a painful reminder of the cost of arrogance and hate. For Maya, it reinforced her belief in resilience and dignity. And for the countless strangers who watched the drama unfold online, it became a cautionary tale about the power of choice and the inevitability of consequence. Somewhere, amidst the ebb and flow of daily life, the universe seemed satisfied. Justice, in its own mysterious way, had been served,